Aggregate functions are an extremely powerful and useful feature of SQL. They are called aggregate functions because they provide a result based on data accumulated from a set of rows rather than just one row of a table. For example, this simple query tells us how many rows there are in the country table because the count function operates on the aggregate of all the rows in the country table rather than just one row at a time. This query uses group by to group sets of rows together and operate on those groups separately. Aggregate functions are most powerful when they're applied to groups rather than the whole table. So in this case, we have counts of how many rows there are in each region rather than just all the counts in the table. Group by breaks the query into groups, and the aggregate functions then operate on the groups of rows separately. Let's take a look at another example, this one out of the album database. This query aggregates the number of tracks per album. So it counts the number of rows in this joined query where the album is the same. This technique is very common where you're combining a join with the aggregate function. And it's important to realize how this works. The join happens first, and then the group by, and then the aggregate function. So in this case, from the joined results, the count counts the number of track number columns in the joined query grouped by the album ID. So you get all the ones with this album ID, there's 14. All the ones with this album ID, there's 10. This is a very common and useful technique. Now let's add a new clause to this. Having is to group by as where would be to select. So in this case, because the tracks result is aggregated, we use having to select only the results where the tracks column is greater than or equal to 10. There we just have the albums with 10 or more tracks in them. Aggregate functions operate on groups of rows rather than individual rows. They're useful on joined queries as well as straight queries. The having clause is to group by as where is to select. Use having when you need to filter your results on an aggregated value.